Hi guys, and welcome to The Psychologist. Today I'm going to take people through the removal of dial and hands on a Seiko watch. We actually have this absolutely stunning Grand Seiko here. This dial and hands, they're just in absolutely beautiful condition. Sent to me from a collector who collects a lot of vintage Grand Seikos and King Seikos. It's 6246 9000. It's a movement I love too. It's a particularly beautiful movement. They run really, really well. A very, very well made watch. Honestly, these vintage Grand Seikos, I know they're climbing in price, but for what you get for a smaller dress watch, they are just absolutely fantastic. Fantastic value for money, and I really recommend people look into them. Today I wanted to go through taking off of dial and hands. I've seen a lot of YouTube videos of people doing, I guess you could call it DIY at-home watch repair. And the way that hands come off, it's quite frightening, to be honest. Hands need to be treated delicately, especially dials. We look at this dial, we can see that just the fantastic condition when it catches the light there. It's absolutely stunning. So I wanted to go through the correct way to take off dial and hands. Firstly, the watch needs to be secured in a specific movement holder that holds it in place. You could use, I have my Seiko movement holders, which are for the 6105, 6139s, models like that. And then we have your traditional kind of Bergeron adjustable movement holder. I prefer these movement holders because they actually are by line and they hold the watch in place securely, so that we can get the dial and hands off, and we can see that if that's not going anywhere. Now, we do not use tweezers to take dial and hands off. We especially do not use steel tweezers to take off hands, which I have seen, and like I said, it's definitely not something we should do. I don't even use steel tweezers on plates and bridges. I use my brass tweezers because they're softer and they're non-marking, and I just find they're generally the best all-around tweezers to use. Tweezers also need to stay in good condition, but that's another subject for another day. So before we go taking our hands off, we need to set our hands so that they all line up together. So in this case, I'm going to move our hands around to where our second hand is. Push in. Let's get our second hand to move forward and pull out our hand to our balance stop, or hacking, as people like to call it these days. But so our balance stop engages with our balance so that we can take our hands off. Now, your best friend in this situation is plastic. I like to use a polythene bag that I cut open and keep aside for taking the dial and hands off. Now, I like to make sure that I use new ones relatively frequently. I know it's not the best thing for the environment because they're single-use plastics, but I do need to keep these watch dials and hands in good condition. So what I like to do is take open a bag, basically, and rip it open and use the nice, clean, fresh inside of the bag. We place the bag over the watch like so, and we take our hand lifting levers. Some people use a Presto tool. I've never been a huge fan of the Presto tool. I prefer levers. The Presto tool is a little automatic tool that looks something like this. This is kind of a cheap Cousins brand knockoff that I bought, and I really don't like them. And it presses down and lifts the hands up like so. I'm not a fan, actually, of these, just for various reasons. The other option is the Horotec hand press, which is actually a fantastic tool, which grips the hands underneath and then presses down. I don't use this for all applications. It's for certain applications, certain chronographs and things, because we don't actually have enough room sometimes to get under the dial. So my weapon of choice generally is hand lifting levers. Now what we like to do is we get our hand lifting levers underneath. Now I'm actually going to move it away because I don't like any chance of putting pressure on our surround for our day and date. So I'm going to move the hands around to here so that we have no chance of marking, because if we press down with our lever on that day and date, it's a delicate surround, we could actually damage that surround there. So we put our plastic back over and we gently lift. We squeeze up. We leverage the dial down and squeeze our hands off. Take our plastic off. Now this is important. Don't start poking around the dial with tweezers to take the hands off. Let gravity do the work for you. Let them fall. Then we can put our hands aside in a container and a bit of Horotec. Now my preferred hand tweezer are these, I believe they're Dumont tweezers, and they have boxwood tips. Now the beauty of the boxwood tip is it's a soft wooden tip and it doesn't mark, it doesn't create any issues like a pair of steel tweezers would, or perhaps even brass, because hands need to be dealt with quite delicately. So we would pick up our hands. We would pick up our hands by the side with our boxwood tweezers, and we would put them in a container to stay safe. Then what I like to do to make sure that they're in is I use a hand pusher just to make sure they're in the Horotec, like so. And our hands can be kept aside for service. Now we come to taking our dial off. Now, it's important that we use finger cots. We don't want the acid from our fingers transferring to a dial. This is an old watch. This is a beautiful dial. It is in fantastic condition. We wouldn't want to do anything to it. Same goes for the movement. We don't want our finger acid getting onto the movement. Can you see here? Can you see this? Can you see this? That's from my skin, and that would be transferred to the watch. My fingers aren't sweating. It's just your fingers have oil and things naturally from your body, and we don't want that getting onto our watch movement. So we would always, we don't want to stick our finger over the dial like this. We want to hold the edge of the dial, but it does give us the freedom to be able to hold the dial and unscrew our dial screws. I'm just going to have to do this off camera because whoever was in this last really put some pressure on those screws. Now again, like to let gravity do our work for us. We can get a little plastic peg. It's important to use plastic so we don't mark anything. And we can pry. Try screw is undone. We can just gently tease our dial off. And then, again, we can let gravity do the work for us. And we can safely pull our dial apart. And again, we can safely store our dial in a tray. Ready to service the movement. So again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope that taught you a little bit about the care that needs to be taken when it comes to... Oh, I've got the day disc popped off there. When it comes to dealing with dials and hands, the reason why we really don't want to damage them, and they are very delicate items that can be damaged easily. So it's always important to take appropriate measures when removing dial and hands from watches. And that's how all watches get treated when they come through the Seikologist workshop here. We make sure that everything is done with attention to detail so that the best care is taken with your beloved timepiece, because I know that these are very beloved amongst most of you. Thanks, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please tell your friends to subscribe, like the channel, and also follow me on Instagram at The Seikologist, and check out my website too for all the current details on pricing and all that kind of thing. So thanks again, and look forward to the next video. Bye, guys.